Hi, this is Roger Plant and Cesar Cartagena from OMRI, and we really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today about organics and compliance and all the services that OMRI offers. Today we're going to be talking about transitioning farming and ranching into the organic world. What we're going to be talking about primarily is allowed and prohibited materials for the transitioning operator. First, to get us off and going, have you ever heard of OMRI? Do you know what we do? We are formally the Organic Materials Review Institute, but we go by OMRI. That's what we're known in the trade. And we do inputs. We review inputs. That's all we do. That's our sole focus. We're a nonprofit. We were established over 25 years ago by certifiers to help certifiers get through the process of getting you into the organic business. Our mission is to support the growth and trust of the organic community through expert, independent, and transparent verification of input materials through education and technical assistance. And that's the primary focus of OMRI, educating people and offering technical assistance so the whole organic category can continue to grow. Part of this certification process that OMRI is involved in is actively supporting the certifier. And how that whole process works is you need to pick out a certifier yourself. There's different options. You can Google, you can talk to your friends and neighbors, but find a certifier that you're very comfortable with, because it's a long-term relationship and it's gotta work for you. Once you do find a certifier, there'll be lots of forms to fill out, lots of paperwork. All of that is required to give integrity to the organic system. People have to trust that organics are worth the price and give them the value that they're paying for, that there's no funny business. There's actual teeth in the process if people cheat. And so the paperwork is necessary for that. Then you'll submit your application to the certifier along with your fees. And part of that involves your organic system plan and talking about what inputs you are using or that you're going to use. And you might discover that some of the inputs that you're using are already OMRI listed. If that's the case, that helps out your certifier a bunch, because either the certifier is going to have to review your inputs or some other material review organization is going to, like OMRI. And if it's been reviewed and it's been listed by OMRI, it gives your certifier an advantage, speeds up the process, and they really appreciate it. Again, OMRI was created by certifiers to help them in this process. The next step is a review of your operational paperwork, and then there'll be an actual inspection where the certifier will send out an inspector to look at your operation and make sure that your organic system plan actually matches up with all the paperwork. And after the paperwork is completed and you're inspected, then you'll get your actual organic certification. Or if there's issues that need to be addressed, the certifier will let you know, and you can address those points that the certifier indicates. Here's a couple resources that I think would be helpful for you as you navigate these waters. One is a USDA website, Transitioning to Organics, and then another is a organic transitioning website. Both valuable, both were worth looking at and taking a few minutes to evaluate the information. Now, in terms of input materials, input products, and our review and the certifier's review, in the scheme of things, as you are working in your operation and you're using input materials, there could be a certifier like Oregon Tilth or CCOF that looks at your materials, and they may have to go through the process of reviewing it, but they might choose to reach out to OMRI and have us actually do the scientific evaluation. It's pretty heavy lifting, and a lot of certifiers will do it, but a lot of them would prefer to have somebody else do it, and that would be a material review organization like OMRI. In a little bit more graphic detail, this is the process that you go through. As a operator, you look for products that are OMRI listed, and then you'll know that it's allowed or not allowed. Oops, sorry, hit the wrong key there. If it's listed, you know it's something that's trustworthy. It's something that you can use. It's something that the certifier may look even deeper than OMRI, but more often than not, they'll take our work and say this is good to go. You will not have any trouble. You'll not have any problems. You'll not have anybody questions your input materials. Give you a second to read over that. You can find this chart in that lower left-hand corner at that web location. From an organic standpoint, and you could actually go to our website. There is a search tool that we'll talk about here in a few minutes, but you could type in the brand name or the manufacturer's name and actually find the certificate to verify that this is a product that is compliant and ready to use. In this particular instance, there's a product that is approved for use by NOP. Okay, in the area of certifiers, OMRI has option to work with certifiers, but they need to subscribe to our services. If they do, and over 2/3 of the certifiers in the United States certifying to NOP standards are subscribing to OMRI, they get to have access to our technical teams and information that other certifiers don't have. Just the same, all certifiers have access to the free information on the database, and all certifiers look for the OMRI listed seal as a source of reference to speed up the process and potentially get your operation certified USDA organic in a quicker measure. We talked a little bit ago about the free resources that we have to offer. One of them is just on our website. If you go to our website, omri.org, and get on the searchable database that we've got there, it's free. Anybody can access it, and you could type in a variety of keywords, and it'll pull up a bunch of solid information. You could also filter the information to do very specific investigations and just get exactly what you want without having to look at a bunch of information you're not very interested in. In this particular example, we typed in turf, the word turf. So if you're looking for something in the grass area, you could find products that would be associated with turf. Or if you're wanting to find out about a particular ingredient and its application in the organic area, you could type that in. So it's a super handy tool. Again, it's free. You just got to go to omri.org. We've got plenty of other free tools too. This is the homepage on our website. And at the top where that red arrow is pointing, there's all of our social tools. To the very far right of the red arrow is where you use our search engine, where you could type in keywords. We're on Facebook, we're on X, we're on LinkedIn. You can get free copies of our e-news. We have information in English and in Spanish. All you have to do to get the Spanish version of our website is, again, following that red arrow off to the right below the search engine area is Espanol. Okay, well, life goes on and you're super busy. And in 6 months from now, you say, how do I use that search tool again? Well, go to YouTube and we've got a very short tutorial on how to use our search engine. It's very, very powerful and there's lots of nuances. So if you want to be an expert in the search tool, or if you just forgot and you want a quick reminder, go to the YouTube link at the top of our webpage, click on it, and you'll find our tutorial on using our search engine. What are some other things that are handy? That OMRI seal where that red arrow is pointing at. If you see any of your products that are coming in from your distributor or local farm store that have the OMRI listed seal on there, you know it's a product that is compliant. If you've even got the least amount of doubt, you could always go to the website, type in the product name or the manufacturer's name, look at the certificate, provide that certificate to your certifier if you'd like to. I mean, help them help you, and it's all there. It's just super simple. We've got some other tools that are out there too. You can find our OMRI products list, which is everything that the database has, but in a written form that you could carry with you. We also have our generic materials list that you can request, get a copy of, but it's all on the website. So digital is one option, printed is another. You could actually subscribe to OMRI for $59 a year, and you'll get our newsletters, our printed newsletters, not just our electronic ones, but ones that are maybe a little deeper, certainly more robust, and regulatory updates. So you're up to the minute. You know as much as your certifier knows, which is a good thing. And then obviously we've got the social resources of LinkedIn, Facebook, etc. And it keeps on going. We've got more resources and links, and you might just take a picture of this with your cell phone, or you can send a request for a copy of this presentation once we're all done with it. But there are scads and scads of people that want to help you out there. OMRI is just one of them. But anything that we can do to help, to encourage, to support, we want to do that. Okay, now let's get into some of the more technical topics in the input area, and Caesar's going to take over.
Yes, hello everyone. Yeah, my name is Caesar. It is our pleasure to present for you, and thanks very much for the invitation and the opportunity to spend some time with all of you talking about input materials. So yeah, as Roger was saying, we will dive a little bit deeper into the specifics about compliant compost use and pesticide use. Well, originally, we had planned to touch upon also sanitizers, cleaners, and disinfectants. So we can tackle all three scopes of organic production, you know, that's crops, livestock, and processing and handling. However, we have so much to talk about just with these 2 points, and I was told that the time limit for this presentation is less than 8 hours. So we kind of had to cut some content there. But if anyone has any questions about processing inputs or the sanitizers, cleaners, disinfectants, anything that is used under the processing scope, then yeah, feel free to contact us directly. And as Roger was saying, we'll have links in at the end of this presentation, and you can reach out to us at any point. Okay, next slide. Okay, with all of that out of the way, the organic regulations under the NOP have a very specific definition of what compost is, along with an ample list of terms that are also used by certifiers and professionals in the sector. So given that, sometimes there might be a bit of a disconnect between the terms and phrases that are used in production amongst farmers, ranchers, and maybe just folks with a small garden on the street or what have you, and how the inspector or your certification reviewer or specialist, how they use those same terms. They might use it in a slightly different way. The reason behind this is because organic professionals, including OMRI and certifiers, they need to be very careful and very specific about what we're trying to tell you, because as organizations, we undergo annual USDA audits, including a rather taxing 5-year audit that can be a little bit intense. So all certification agencies need to go through that, and the correspondence, particularly written correspondence, needs to be very clear, and all the terms and definitions need to be consistent with what the NOP has listed under the regulations. Similarly, we undergo these audits as well as internal audits and definitions of these terms, which are determined by the NOP itself. So this is what the NOP has defined as compost, the product of a managed process through which microorganisms break down plant animal materials into more available forms suitable for application to the soil. So as I mentioned before, this definition parallels the definition that OMRI has for compost. And this is true for all relevant terms that we have listed on our standards manual, which is also free and available for download on our website. We will have the links at the end as well. But not to further complicate the plot, but the definition of basic terms like compost, pesticide, or even the term organic itself kind of varies among different organic standards. Canada has a slightly different definition for these terms. So does Japan, the European Union, and even among our government agencies. We'll talk about that a little bit later. So it's a good idea to check out the regulations themselves and see how these determine what a compliant compost is. So let's go straight to the regulations, and here they are. 205, 203 is what we want to look at. So this is what the NOP has defined as a compliant compost. So compost must be produced through a process that combines plant and animal materials with the initial ratio, CN ratio between 25:1 and 40:1. So that's very, very specific. Sometimes we do get manufacturers that they've been manufacturing compost for many, many years, sometimes even decades. And maybe they've been doing it conventionally, and then they want to be reviewed under organic regulations, and sometimes they don't meet these very, very specific requirements, and that may cause a little bit of confusion. So it's always good to go back to the regulations and see, okay, so these are very, very specific. So it doesn't mean that your compost is not compost. It just means that it's not compliant under the organic regulations at this time. So producers can also use an in-vessel or static aerated pile system and maintain the composting materials at a certain temperature range. Once again, very specific, between 131 and 170 Fahrenheit for at least 3 days. producers using particular windrow systems must maintain the composting materials. Once again, that range that's a little bit longer for 15 days. So and also there is a turning requirement for folks using windrow systems, and this is the materials need to be turned a minimum of 5 times to ensure that it's fully composted. Okay. As you can see, it's not just the origin and status of the feedstocks used in the compost that determines compliance. It's the composting itself, the process itself. So it's important for input manufacturers, composters, to know uh, uh, all these regulations. But since this is the input that is most commonly made on farm or for on-farm use amongst organic operators, then folks in transition, as well as folks that are already certified, and then all of a sudden they decide, okay, uh, it's a little bit cheaper for me to just do my own composting, use some of my own green waste and compost that and use it in my operation. It's important for you all to know this as well. So once again, if if you have any particular questions about this, feel free to reach out or go straight to the regulations. And that's 205, 203 is the section that you want to look at. So now we're going to complicate it a little bit more and add manure to the mix. Obviously, we all know manure is extremely important, actually vital to many crop operations. So what happens when we add manure to a compost as a feedstock? Well, here it is. We definitely have a lot more restrictions here. So if you apply raw animal manure, that must be fully composted, unless these 3 things happen. The compost is applied to the land, and the crop itself is not intended for human consumption. If you want to use it for your animals, that is quite all right. Also, it needs to be incorporated into the soil not less than 120 days before the harvest of any product whose edible portion has direct contact with the soil surface or the soil particles, or incorporated into the soil no less than 90 days prior to the harvest, whose edible portion does not have direct contact with the soil surface or particles. For example, if it's a fruit tree. However, the 120-day restriction is for commodities such as lettuce or carrots or potatoes that are in constant contact with the soil. So this is where the famous 90-120-day rule comes from. It's the 205, 203 restrictions for raw animal manure use in compost. Next slide. Okay. So compost that include non-synthetic substances that are not prohibited in the national list at 602. That includes crop residues and other plant material. They must be approved for use for specifically plant or soil amendments. And that includes synthetic nutrients as well. As we all know, synthetic micronutrients are very important to the success of the harvest. So if you're going to use these materials, they need to be specifically approved for plant or soil amendment use. Agricultural feedstocks do not have to be certified organic. That's another misconception that folks think that, okay, my compost needs to be compliant under the organic regulation. So therefore, all of my feedstocks need to be certified organic. And that is not the case. Compost made from allowed feedstocks is unrestricted if it meets all these standards, meaning that, for example, if everything is fully composted, you have all the backing of your documents to let your certifier or OMRI know that you're compliant with the regulations, then the compost has no use restrictions, and that will be, if you are looking to be OMRI listed, the certificate along with the decision for the status of that product will not have a restriction. So sometimes you will see certain composts that don't have any restrictions. This is why. Apart from that, another way that we let folks know about, okay, are there any restrictions with this particular compost? Can I use it in a certain way? We have many listing categories for compost, depending on their feedstocks and how they're composed or composted, sorry. For example, we have compost in a vessel or static aerated pile. That could be plant or animal materials. They have their specific restrictions. The restriction that you will see under that will be the temperature range. The 131 and 170 Fahrenheit for 3 consecutive days. Then you have our category compost, other. That one has a little bit more restrictions. Compost windrow, that one also has, as we were talking about, additional restrictions aside from the temperature range, the length of composting under that temperature range increases to 15 consecutive days and at least 5 turnings during that period. We also have very specific compost category names and restrictions. For example, compost that it is derived from mushroom media waste. For them, the mushroom media waste feedstock has to be derived from allowed materials, as we were talking about, and they have the same temperature range restriction. We have very specific composting categories for worm castings. They have their own. We have multiple different category names for all the different permutations of manure feedstock composts. We can be all day here talking about all these categories, but essentially the point is that another way that OMRI lets people know, the general public know, okay, so what's this compost all about, is the category name itself. So that is part of the transparency portion of our mission, and we want folks to be informed when they're ready to use the product. Actually, Roger, could we go back to that slide? So another way that we help is there's so much information that's out there that we can talk about regarding compost feedstocks, but we do have a wonderful chart, and this is part of that. That chart, there's no way that we can fit that chart into any one slide here. But I picked the more relevant portion of it. It's a great chart for all, for the public, and actually as a certification reviewer in the past, I kind of used these resources in the past. It's nice to have that information condensed into one chart. So essentially, this outlines the currently approved feedstocks under NOP that we know of. Obviously, you know, the sector always evolves and regulations change and all of that. You can see the restrictions as well and how OMRI reviews them. So as I was saying, just a snippet of all the information that's out there. As a little bit of a story here with folks, once again, with that misconception that, okay, I can use any kind of feedstock because if the composting process that I used is compliant, if you know, all the feedstock material, even if it's not allowed, it's going to be fully broken down. At one point, under one of my experiences before OMRI, someone tried to use cold cuts and particularly large amounts of bologna from the nearby uh, uh, plant that they discarded of some of these cold cuts to be thrown in the garbage, and they're like, well, let's add it to the compost. It's essentially they try to use processed meats as a feedstock. Obviously, we cannot allow that. Once again, coming back to the regulations, but folks get creative with their feedstocks and resources. But it's important to know that once again, it's not just the composting process that needs to be compliant. The feedstocks themselves in their origin need to be allowed under the regulations from the very beginning, and not assume that the composting process will make them compliant. Next slide. Okay, so what's another way that OMRI determines the status of a product under the in the OMRI list? Well, we expect lab analyses for all these composts. Obviously, it varies depending on the category, but we expect certain things from our applicants. We have a few requirements regarding the analyses submitted. They need to be less than a year old, for example. They have to reflect clearly the results under very specific units, depending on the analysis type. And they have to be from an accredited lab. So in the case of compost, this is what we're looking for. So we focus heavily on salmonella and fecal coliforms as pathogens. And so if they're above a certain number, then OMRI either adds a caution statement, or it gets moved to a different category that better suits the composition of this material, or it gets prohibited. Same with the other 2 points that we have identified these particular contaminants: arsenic, cadmium, and lead. And once again, if they're above a certain limit, then we take all those precautions. And also, as I was mentioning, we reserve the right to restrict or prohibit fertilizers that contain other contaminants. Obviously, this right that OMRI wields is backed by the organic regulations. If you want to learn a little bit more about labs or the expectations from lab analyses, there's a link right there, omri.org/resources, and you'll have plenty of lovely charts to look at. Next slide. As I was talking about earlier, caution statements are one of the ways that we let the public know, and anybody else who wants to know if this particular input is safe and how to use it. So in this particular instance, this certificate, it's OMRI listed, it's an OMRI listed material, but this has a caution statement. This is very specific. This is another example. We'll hop into compost specific examples in a bit, but this caution statement is regarding the use of GE substrate. Obviously, genetically engineered materials are one of the big no-nos in organic production. So this contains that. And this is very specific to the Canadian organic regulations. But this is kind of what it looks like. This is where you would see that caution statement right underneath the restriction field. Here's the statement, the caution statement for our CF, or crop fertilizers and soil amendments categories. And you'll see that it is very specific. Application of this product to certified organic farms poses a significant threat. Pathogen mitigation measures, such as the 120-90-day pre-harvest applications that we're talking about. It references the NOP composting standards at 203. It must be part of the organic system plan. So obviously, if you see this kind of language in an OMRI certificate, you see a caution statement, please contact your certifier, let them know that, okay, there's a caution statement here. Uh, make sure that you're using this, this input compliantly and correctly. Okay, so this is a brief snippet of all the different compost categories that we have. I started naming them, just the ones that came to mind right away. But I mean, just take a look at compost tea, all the different categories that we have for compost tea, how specific the restrictions are, and essentially, this information is in our one of the most versatile and useful resources that anybody can have in the organic sector, and that is the OMRI list itself, where you'll see all the different materials that we have listed and products with their restrictions. And of course, if you want a little bit more detail, more technical detail, such as these descriptions, you can find all of that in our organic material or generic materials list, which has very specific descriptions of our categories and how that relates to the regulations. So for folks who are composting on farm, or folks who want to be OMRI listed and composting is their business, obviously we expect a lot of paperwork. As you all know, from being transitioning farmers, organic certification is a lot of paperwork, and so remember to keep all of the documents and papers you think you might need for on-site inspections, as Roger was saying, and audits. So what does OMRI expect from these input manufacturers and these composters? Well, we need to verify the temperature ranges, so we need temperature logs. We need turning logs. We need all the supporting documents that let us know what the types and resource or source of the feedstocks are. And as we were talking about kind of heavily, lab analyses, depending on what kind of feedstocks it has. It will need heavy metals or pathogen or both. So that is a little bit of what you're going to expect if you do a little bit of composting on farm. And now we're ready to talk about pesticides. Similarly, the NOP has very specific definitions of what a pesticide is. And this is a question that I have received personally in either trade shows or conferences or what have you. And I start talking about pesticides and their restrictions. And then I have follow-up questions such as, what about herbicides? Or what about fungicides? And well, my answer is, well, pesticides actually is an all-inclusive term that includes herbicides, fungicides, insecticides. It just means that it's just a more specific term for what we're talking about. Think about it as a Venn diagram, where pesticides is the big bubble, and then herbicides is the small bubble. They're pesticides specifically targeting herbs, fungicides specifically targeting fungi, insecticides specifically for insects, as the name implies. And that's kind of the pattern. So when I say pesticides, that includes all of that. So as far as the NOP regulations go, there's no specific differentiation among these different subgenres of pesticides. So that's kind of why OMRI sticks to this all overarching term. So this is how the NOP defines a pesticide: any substance which alone in chemical combination or any formulation with one or more substances is defined as a pesticide. And very specific section of the federal insecticide, fungicide, rodenticide, that's another subgenre there of pesticide act, which is known as FIFRA. And we'll talk about FIFRA in a little bit. Next slide. So there's quite a story behind this. So why does this matter? Why does FIFRA and the EPA come into play here with the organic regulations? Well, they do have their own definition of what pesticides are. Uh, uh, as you see, there are three different points: any substance or mixture of substances intended for preventing, destroying, repelling, or mitigating any pest, or any substance or mixture of substances intended for use as a plant regulator, defoliant, or desiccant, and any nitrogen stabilizer. But so why does the NOP need to reference the EPA or FIFRA for the review of pesticides? Next slide. Well, it's kind of interesting. Before we get into the NOP regulations and why these other government agencies are referenced in the organic regulations. Well, FIFRA was established back in 1947, so way back before the EPA was even a thing. So at the time, the USDA regulated pesticide distribution, sales, registration, the use restrictions. Essentially, they took care of everything that was pesticide related, conventional, organic, or under any other standard. However, once the EPA was established back in 1972, uh, the USDA was no longer directly involved with these decisions. Later on, the NOP was established in 2002 officially. And the technical understanding of pesticides and the criteria utilized for inert ingredients in pesticides, these include the EPA list 3 and list 4 of allowed inerts and organics. And that's a whole other topic that we'll touch upon a little bit later. But as well as tolerance levels for these substances that are safe for human consumption and for import-export requirements were left to the EPA. So the EPA is now in charge of all of that. So now the organic regulations reference the EPA for all of these cases, for all these situations that organic goods sometimes go through. So the allowed synthetic inerts, as we're talking about, these lists to be used in pesticides are the inerts of unknown toxicity, as the EPA defines it, or the EPA list 3, and the inerts of minimal concern. That's the EPA list 4, and you can just type that on any search engine, and you'll see exactly the list of all those materials, and on the EPA website you'll see all the tolerance levels for each and every one of those. Which leads us to the regulations themselves. Similarly, so the section for pesticides is 205, 206 in the regulations. So if you want all the details, go straight to 205, 206. These are the requirements. Must use management practices first to prevent crop pests, weeds, and diseases. Pest problems may be controlled through mechanical or physical methods. This includes weed problems and disease problems. So what does that mean? Next slide. This means that before you go ahead and go, pesticide happy, even if it is approved for organic use, make sure that you have used, physical or mechanical means to address this pesticide problem or the pest problem. make sure that that you have solid points of prevention of pest activity in your organic system plan. So essentially, pesticides are a bit of a last resort. And this is what 205, 206E refers to. That's a lot of, it's a nice lengthy paragraph, but essentially it is telling you or telling everybody that, okay, if you're going to use pesticides, it's going to be a last resort kind of a situation after you've done, 205, 206, A through D, before you can go ahead and use E. Next slide. Very, very quickly, pesticides under material review are the only substances that have two very defined types of ingredients that are defined by their function. So active ingredient, any substance that will prevent, destroy, repel, or mitigate any pests, or that functions as a plant regulator, the second defoliant within the meaning of FIFRA. Inert ingredient is any substance other than the active ingredient. As you well know, you will see on labels, and this is a part of how the EPA regulates and reviews pesticide labels. That's why you will always see on a pesticide the active ingredient on the label. Next slide. So what does that mean for OMRI? Well, it means that most of our or the pesticide products that we review will have the 205, 206E restriction, meaning that it just comes standard with most substances that are used as pesticides, because as we're talking about, it's a last resort kind of a thing. Essentially, it's just telling you, okay, the only restriction is you needed to try, physical or mechanical means first, and you needed to have a prevention plan for pests in your organic system plan. And you needed to do that first. And if that didn't work, then you can use this. So it's not something to, to cause alarm. If you see a restriction on you go to an OMRI website, and you want to see the status of a particular product, and you see that restriction, it's no reason to be alarmed if you see this this language here referring to 205, 206E, and that's what that means. It just comes standard with most pesticides, so no reason to be alarmed. Next slide. Yeah, very, very quickly, this is how OMRI has narrowed down all these restrictions. This is under the class crop pest, weed disease control. It's known as CP for short. We love our abbreviations and acronyms at OMRI. So the class that had compost or contains compost categories was CF for crop fertilizers, and this is crop pest, so CP for pesticides. So they may be applied to either plants or soil unless the restrictions specify otherwise. Substances are allowed only for disease control. So that's why the label is so important, because that lets you know what's going to be the use for this. Even if it's it has efficacy in other uses, if it says that it must be used for pesticides or as pest control, and it just so happens that the active ingredient is good for other things, and it's not allowed to be used for that other thing that you discovered that it's good for. Before you go ahead and do that, either reach out to us at OMRI to answer any questions that you might have about use restrictions, or your certifier. They might go ahead and perform their own review, further review of this material, or they can contact us. Also non-synthetic or synthetic origin assignment in the category. That reflects to the active ingredient only. So that's why sometimes you will see in pesticide labels that, okay, I can see the active ingredient, but how come I can't see the inert ingredients? All those review criteria are established by the EPA and how they label registered pesticides. So certain materials do not need to disclose all of their inert ingredients, but all of them need to disclose the active ingredients because of what we're talking about, the use restrictions. So the products in our CP class may be formulated with synthetic inert ingredients. As I was saying, these inert ingredients that are listed in EPA list 3 and 4 from 2004. Next slide. And this is a great example of, okay, what do these restrictions look like? We talked about, how the EPA reviews it, how the NOP reviews it, how OMRI reviews it, and what do we make of it, all of this? So this is a great example of, number one, the very few instances in which a category under OMRI review, it does not have any restrictions. That is biological controls up top. It's because, the active ingredient is living organisms. The only restriction that is not specifically for pesticides, so it doesn't reference 205, 206E. This is essentially, as I was saying, one of the big no-nos of any organic operation. So it's more of a generic restriction. So that's why it's considered to be unrestricted because it's non-synthetic. And right below is the more typical pesticide that you'll see. This category just happens to be biopesticides. Generally, you will see a lot with restrictions, and below a bunch of different restrictions. And that references, as we were talking about, all the inerts that can be used. And just because the label only discloses the active ingredient doesn't mean that OMRI does not review all the inerts. It's just that through the EPA label review, particularly EPA registered pesticides, those are the criteria that that they need to comply with in terms of labeling. But for us, we review them anyways. So, and you will see right underneath. So what are the restrictions? Yep, that's the 205, 206E. You'll see that a lot. And the 205, 601 is more of the synthetic inerts. That's what that refers to, that may be used in biopesticides. With all of that, I hope we didn't bore you too much with all this technical jargon, but thank you very much for your attention. And of course, usually we have at the end a lovely Q&A session with the attendees and with anybody who wants to ask us questions. In this case, since we're recording it after the event, we're not able to do that. But if for some reason you want to schedule a Q&A session with us regarding this presentation, you definitely can. So reach out to us at OMRI, all these different email addresses, marketing@omri.org, or either of us directly, and we will make it happen for you. But once again, it's been my pleasure to present for you today, and thank you, Roger, for tackling half of all this.
Thank you for joining us. We truly appreciate helping, and never forget, we're here to serve you guys.
That's right. Thank you all.